Most men will never hear what I'm about to say, and the ones who do will feel deeply uncomfortable. Because this isn't about tricks, money, looks, or confidence hack. It's about a psychological advantage that silently separates the men women feel curious about from the men they feel overwhelmed by. And once you understand it, you can't unsee it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Younger women are not obsessed with older men because they are older. They're drawn to something far rarer than youth or attraction. They are responding to a presence that doesn't ask, doesn't chase, and doesn't collapse under emotional pressure. And most men don't realize they're doing the exact opposite every single day. Think about this for a moment. Have you ever met someone who said very little, yet somehow controlled the entire room? Someone whose calm made others talk more, reveal more, leaning closer? That isn't confidence. That's internal stability. And the female nervous system detects it instantly. What repels attraction is not a lack of effort. It's emotional urgency, the need to be chosen, the need to be validated, the need to be reassured. And the more you try to secure desire, the faster it slips away. Older men who understand this don't compete with younger men. They don't play the same game. They don't chase attention. They let attention come to them by staying anchored when others become reactive. And here's what most people won't admit. Attraction isn't created by what you do for someone. It's created by how you make them feel in your presence. Calm, grounded, unrushed, safe. If you've ever wondered why some men barely speak yet leave a lasting imprint, why their silence feels louder than other men's effort, or why women remember them long after the interaction ends, this conversation will change how you see attraction forever. Stay with me, because once you understand this, you won't try harder, you'll become different. Most men misunderstand attraction because they think it begins with what you say, how you look, or how much effort you put in. But attraction begins far earlier than that. It begins in the nervous system. Before a woman decides whether she likes you, her body decides whether you feel safe, stable, and predictable enough to relax around. This is where emotional regulation becomes the silent advantage older men carry, often without even realizing it. When an emotionally regulated man walks into a room, nothing dramatic happens on the surface. He isn't loud, he isn't trying to be seen, but there is a subtle shift. His presence feels grounded. His energy isn't scattered or urgent. He's not reacting to every stimulus, every glance, every moment of silence. And the female nervous system is incredibly sensitive to this. It is constantly scanning for signals of stability or threat. When it encounters a man who remains calm under pressure, who doesn't flinch at uncertainty, the body registers safety before the mind can even explain why. Younger men often sabotage attraction not because they lack value, but because they leak anxiety. They respond too quickly. They explain too much. They rush to smooth over tension. The moment something feels uncertain, they try to fix it with words. But emotional regulation means you don't rush to control the outcome. You allow space. You allow silence. You trust your internal stability more than the need for reassurance. Older men have lived long enough to know that discomfort is not dangerous. Silence is not rejection. Tension does not require immediate resolution. That knowledge changes how they show up. When a woman tests boundaries, pulls back, or becomes emotionally unpredictable, an emotionally regulated man doesn't chase clarity. He doesn't demand reassurance. He stays steady, and that steadiness does something profound. It calms her nervous system instead of amplifying it. This is why so many women describe certain men as feeling safe without being boring, and strong without being aggressive. Safety doesn't mean softness. It means consistency. It means emotional containment. A regulated man can sit with uncertainty without collapsing into insecurity or control, and that capacity creates trust faster than compliments ever could. There is also a deeper philosophical layer to this. Emotional regulation signals self-mastery. It shows that a man is not ruled by impulse, fear, or external validation. He doesn't outsource his emotional state to another person's behavior. His calm is internally generated. And when a woman senses that, she senses leadership. Not leadership in the domineering sense, but in the psychological sense. The kind that says, I can handle myself, so I won't lose myself trying to handle you. You see, attraction grows in contrast. When one person is reactive and the other is regulated, polarity forms. But when both people are anxious, there is no anchor. Older men often become that anchor simply because they are no longer fighting their emotions. They've learned that feelings rise and fall whether you panic or not. So they stop chasing emotional highs and lows and instead embody emotional steadiness. This is also why emotional regulation feels rare and powerful today. In a world of instant responses, constant stimulation, and emotional oversharing, restraint feels almost radical. A man who doesn't emotionally spill, who doesn't need immediate feedback, who doesn't make his anxiety someone else's responsibility, stands out effortlessly. And here's the part most men miss. Emotional regulation is not something you perform. You cannot fake it. The body always knows. It comes from doing the internal work, from learning to sit with discomfort, from not making rejection a personal emergency, from building a life where your identity is not dependent on being chosen. When a woman feels your calm, she doesn't just feel attraction, she feels relief. And relief is powerful. It makes her want to stay, it makes her open up, it makes her attach meaning to your presence. So if there is one shift that changes everything, it's this. Stop trying to manage how she feels and start mastering how you respond. Because the man who can regulate himself becomes the man others emotionally orbit around. And that's worth reflecting on. Are you trying to create attraction through effort or through inner stability? Because the strongest influence you will ever have over someone else begins with the way you hold yourself when nothing is guaranteed. Once emotional regulation is in place, something else quietly takes shape, something far more magnetic than charm or confidence. It is non-neediness. And this is where most men misunderstand attraction at a fundamental level. They believe desire is created by doing more, proving more, giving more. But psychological attraction doesn't respond to excess. It responds to balance. And non-neediness is balance in human form. Neediness is not about wanting someone. Wanting is natural. Neediness is about attaching your sense of worth, direction, or emotional stability to whether someone chooses you. The moment a man's internal state depends on a woman's response, the dynamic shifts. He is no longer choosing, he is auditioning. And the female nervous system reads this instantly, often before she can articulate it. Older men tend to lose this neediness not because they stop caring, but because life has stripped them of illusions. They've chased before, they've attached before. They've learned, sometimes painfully, that no external person can complete them. That realization doesn't harden them, it centers them. And that centeredness becomes deeply attractive because it creates psychological safety without pressure. A non-needy man doesn't rush emotional intimacy. He doesn't push for reassurance. He doesn't require constant contact to feel secure. His interest is present but not consuming. And that distinction is crucial. Interest without demand feels clean. It allows a woman to explore her own feelings without feeling responsible for managing his emotions. This is where obsession quietly forms, not through pursuit but through space. The human mind fills space with meaning. When a man is not constantly available, not constantly checking, not constantly seeking confirmation, his absence becomes as powerful as his presence. He is not playing games. He is simply not dependent. Many men fear that non-neediness will make them appear cold or detached. In reality, it does the opposite. It makes their attention feel valuable. Scarcity is not manufactured through withdrawal. It is a natural byproduct of a full life. A man who has purpose, discipline, and internal direction does not rearrange his entire world for emotional validation. And when he chooses to give his time, it carries weight. Psychologically, non-neediness signals abundance. Not abundance of options necessarily, but abundance of self. It tells the other person, I am already whole. And wholeness is attractive because it doesn't consume. It complements. A woman can step toward a man like this without losing herself, because he is not asking her to fill a void. There is also a philosophical maturity in non-neediness. It requires accepting uncertainty. It means being okay with not knowing how things will turn out. Most people try to control outcomes because they are afraid of discomfort. A non-needy man tolerates uncertainty. He understands that attachment grows organically, not through force. That patience is rare, and rarity amplifies desire. When a younger woman encounters a man who doesn't chase her attention, who doesn't demand emotional labor, who doesn't collapse when she pulls back, something unexpected happens. She leans in, because for the first time she is not being asked to perform or reassure. She is free to desire without obligation, and desire that is freely chosen is far more intense than desire that is pressured. Non-neediness also preserves dignity. A man who doesn't beg for consistency doesn't need to negotiate his worth. He doesn't over-explain his intentions or overcompensate for silence. He trusts that the right connection will meet him where he stands. That trust becomes self-fulfilling because people tend to rise to the level of expectation they are given. This is why older men often appear effortlessly attractive. They are not effortless because they are lucky. They are effortless because they stopped overreaching. They learned that attraction is not about pulling someone closer, but about not pushing yourself forward. So here is the question worth sitting with. Are you trying to be wanted, or are you building a life that makes being with you a choice, not a rescue? Because the moment you stop needing to be chosen is the moment others begin to feel the pull to choose you. Once non-neediness is established, something even more decisive begins to operate beneath the surface. This is what is often referred to as holding the frame. But very few people truly understand what that means. It is not control, it is not dominance, it is not emotional rigidity. Holding the frame is the ability to remain internally anchored while someone else's emotions fluctuate. And psychologically, this is where attraction deepens into fixation. Most relational dynamics collapse during moments of emotional testing. A woman may pull back, go quiet, question the connection, or shift her energy. This is not manipulation in most cases. It is exploration. It is the nervous system asking, is this environment stable, or will it collapse if I lean on it? The problem is that many men fail this moment. They panic. They chase reassurance. They demand explanations. They try to talk emotions into order. And in doing so, they hand over their internal authority. An older man who holds the frame responds differently. He does not rush to fix what is not broken. He does not interpret emotional distance as abandonment. He understands that emotions move like weather, not like contracts. So instead of reacting, he observes. Instead of pushing, he remains present. And instead of asking for certainty, he embodies it. This is powerful because emotional leadership is rare. Most people outsource their emotional stability to others. They feel good when they are validated and destabilized when they are not. A man who holds the frame does not do this. His sense of self does not rise and fall based on someone else's mood. That does not mean he lacks empathy. It means his empathy does not come at the cost of his center. Psychologically, this creates polarity. When one person remains grounded, the other feels free to feel. A woman can express confusion, doubt, or vulnerability without fearing that the entire connection will destabilize, and this paradoxically makes her more invested, not less. Because she is no longer managing his emotions, she can finally pay attention to her own. Holding the frame also means resisting the urge to over-communicate. Many men believe clarity creates security. In reality, excessive explanation often signals insecurity. A grounded man trusts that consistency over time speaks louder than emotional negotiations. He does not argue feelings. He does not defend his value. He allows behavior to reveal truth. This is where obsession can quietly form. When someone realizes they cannot shake your center, they begin to orbit it. Not because you demand attention, but because your steadiness becomes a reference point. The mind becomes curious about what does not react. The nervous system relaxes around what does not collapse. There is also a philosophical maturity here. Holding the frame requires surrendering the illusion of control. You accept that you cannot manage another person's emotional process. You can only manage your response. This acceptance creates strength. It shifts you from performer to presence. And presence is deeply magnetic. Younger men often believe that intensity creates connection. In truth, intensity without structure creates chaos. Older men who have learned to hold the frame understand that depth comes from containment, from knowing when to speak and when to remain silent, from allowing space without withdrawal, from staying engaged without chasing. When a woman senses that a man will not abandon himself to keep her, something profound happens. She trusts him more, not because he promises safety, but because he demonstrates it through consistency. She feels that she can lean without him tipping over, and that sensation is rare. Holding the frame does not mean tolerating disrespect. In fact, it requires boundaries. A man who is centered does not argue boundaries. He enforces them calmly. He does not threaten or explain endlessly. He simply acts in alignment with his values, and that clarity commands respect. Over time, this dynamic reverses the usual power struggle. Instead of a man trying to keep a woman interested, the woman becomes attuned to the man's presence. His emotional steadiness becomes something she checks in with. His reactions, or lack of them, begin to matter. So reflect on this honestly. When emotions rise, do you try to control the moment, or can you hold yourself through it? Because the man who can remain grounded when things are uncertain becomes the emotional anchor others instinctively move toward. And that kind of strength does not need to be announced. It is felt. Once a man can regulate his emotions, let go of neediness, and hold his internal frame, something quieter but far more powerful begins to shape attraction. Silence, not the awkward kind, not withdrawal, but intentional restraint. This is where most men feel uncomfortable, because silence forces you to trust that your presence alone is enough. In modern dating culture, noise is mistaken for connection. Constant texting, constant reassurance, constant explanation. Many men believe that staying relevant means staying visible. But psychologically, attraction deepens in the opposite direction. Desire grows in the spaces where imagination is allowed to work. Older men tend to understand this instinctively. They don't narrate every thought. They don't fill every pause. They allow conversations to breathe. And that restraint changes how they are perceived. Silence signals confidence because it suggests that you are not afraid of being misunderstood, forgotten, or replaced. You trust that what you offer does not need constant reinforcement. From a psychological perspective, the mind is always seeking patterns. When everything is explained, predicted, and exposed, there is nothing left to explore. Mystery isn't about secrecy. It's about not over-delivering emotionally before a bond has earned that depth. A man who reveals himself slowly allows attraction to mature rather than spike and burn out. Restraint also protects polarity. When a man rushes emotional intimacy, he collapses distance too quickly. He moves into emotional closeness before trust has been built. That often overwhelms the nervous system. Silence, when used correctly, regulates pace. It says, there is no rush. We can let this unfold. And that pacing creates comfort rather than pressure. Younger women are especially sensitive to this. Many are accustomed to men who flood them with attention early on, only to become inconsistent later. When a man is restrained from the beginning, his consistency stands out. His attention feels intentional rather than impulsive, and intention carries weight. There is also a deeper philosophical signal in silence. It reflects inner fullness. A man who is content with his inner world does not need to externalize everything. He does not seek validation through constant expression. His thoughts are measured. His words are deliberate, and when he speaks, it lands. Restraint is also what prevents emotional bargaining. Many men talk themselves out of attraction by over-explaining, justifying, or clarifying emotions that don't need to be clarified yet. A restrained man allows actions to speak. He lets time reveal alignment. He understands that words mean little without consistency. This is where obsession quietly takes root. The human mind becomes attached to what it cannot fully predict. When a man is emotionally stable but not emotionally overexposed, he occupies mental space. Not because he demands it, but because he leaves room for curiosity. Silence gives the other person something to lean into internally. Importantly, restraint is not emotional withholding, it is discernment. It means you share depth when it is earned, not as a bid for closeness. You listen more than you perform. You allow connection to develop organically rather than forcing intimacy through vulnerability dumps. Older men who have learned this understand that emotional intimacy is sacred. It is not currency. It is not leverage. It is something that unfolds naturally when both people feel safe and grounded. Silence protects that process. In a world where everyone is constantly explaining themselves, the man who pauses stands out. In a culture of emotional excess, restraint feels grounding, and grounding is deeply attractive. So ask yourself this: are you filling space because you fear losing attention, or are you allowing space because you trust your value? Because the man who can be present without overreaching creates a tension that doesn't push people away. It pulls them closer, quietly, over time. When everything we've talked about comes together, emotional regulation, non-neediness, holding your frame, and restraint, it expresses itself in one final unmistakable way: self-respect. And this is the point where attraction stops being temporary and starts becoming deeply rooted. Because self-respect doesn't just attract, it stabilizes. At a psychological level, younger women are not drawn to men who try to absorb their chaos. They are drawn to men who are unavailable to it. That doesn't mean coldness. It means discernment. A self-respecting man does not confuse empathy with self-abandonment. He can care without compromising his center, and that is profoundly reassuring. Many men believe love is proven through tolerance, enduring disrespect, overlooking inconsistency, accepting emotional volatility in the name of connection. But what this actually communicates is low self-worth. When a man tolerates what unsettles him, he teaches others how to treat him. And the nervous system does not feel safe around someone who cannot protect his own boundaries. Older men who carry self-respect understand this intuitively. They do not argue their boundaries. They do not negotiate their values. They do not threaten to leave in order to be taken seriously. They simply align their actions with what they will and will not accept. That calm enforcement of standards creates clarity, and clarity creates safety. From the female perspective, this is grounding. A man with self-respect does not pull a woman into emotional chaos. He does not oscillate between intensity and withdrawal. He does not reward inconsistency with more effort. His behavior is predictable in the healthiest sense. And predictability, when paired with depth, allows attachment to form without anxiety. This is where many younger women feel a shift they cannot fully explain. Around a man like this, they feel less reactive, less defensive, less compelled to test, because there is nothing to push against. His boundaries are not walls, they are structure, and structure allows relaxation. Self-respect also removes the need for control. A man who values himself does not try to dominate outcomes. He does not fear loss because he trusts his ability to recover. That confidence changes how he loves. He chooses rather than clings. He invites rather than persuades. And choice feels infinitely better than pressure. There is a philosophical maturity here that cannot be faked. Self-respect comes from knowing who you are without external confirmation. It comes from building a life where your identity is not dependent on being wanted. And when a woman senses that, she feels free to want you without obligation. That freedom intensifies desire. Younger women often carry emotional unpredictability, not because they are unstable, but because they are unconsciously scanning for safety. When a man lacks self-respect, they feel it. When he over-tolerates, over-explains, or over-sacrifices, it creates uncertainty. When a man respects himself, that uncertainty dissolves. This is why self-respect is the most attractive form of leadership. It doesn't instruct, it doesn't correct, it models. A self-respecting man does not need to tell a woman how to treat him. His standards are felt through his consistency. Over time, this creates emotional attachment that is calm, not chaotic, secure, not addictive, and paradoxically, that security is what makes the connection feel deep rather than dull. Because there is room to grow instead of constant repair. So if you want to understand why some older men leave such a lasting imprint, it's not because they did more. It's because they allowed less disrespect, less chaos, less emotional bargaining. They chose peace over performance. And here is the question that matters most. Are you trying to be loved at the cost of yourself, or are you building a self that others feel safe loving? Because the moment you choose self-respect, you stop chasing attraction and start becoming the place where it naturally settles.